In 1904, America hosted the largest World's Fair the world had ever seen. They called it a celebration of progress, of science, of human achievement. But hidden behind the fanfare was a dark and humiliating display. More than 1,000 Filipinos, men, women, and children, were shipped across the ocean. To be put in cages. To be stared at like zoo animals. To be called uncivilized for entertainment. This was not a forgotten circus act. It was U.S. government-sponsored propaganda. And this is their story. In 1904, St. Louis became the center of the world. The Louisiana Purchase Exposition, what we now call the St. Louis World's Fair, was a celebration of American progress. More than 20 million visitors came to see what the future looked like. But the future was built on conquest. And hidden behind the light bulbs and inventions was the largest human exhibit in world history, the Philippine Reservation. They didn't just show off machines. They showed off people, not volunteers, not diplomats, but Filipinos shipped like specimens, to be caged, stared at, and humiliated. Only 5 years earlier, the Philippine-American War had just ended, a war most Americans had never heard of. But Americans still asked, why are we occupying the Philippines? Answering that question became a matter of public relations. So the U.S. government built a spectacle. Dr. Truman Hunt, a surgeon turned ethnographer, worked with the U.S. Bureau of Insular Affairs to recruit or coerce 1,102 Filipinos from over 10 different ethnic groups, including Igorots, Ifugaos, Atis, Bagobos, Moros, Tagalogs, Visayans, and more. Some were told they were cultural ambassadors. Others were forced. They were gathered, quarantined, inspected like livestock, and shipped on U.S. Army transports. They arrived tired, disoriented, and malnourished. The Philippine Reservation was a 47-acre replica of a tribal village. Fake huts, props for staged headhunting, signs labeling tribes like exhibits. Even before the fair opened, headlines read, Igorots to show dog-eating habits, savages from the Orient to perform for president. This was not education. This was dehumanization. Every day, they were forced to perform, dance, chant, fake rituals. The most exploited were the Igorots. Why? Because they occasionally ate dog meat. Fair organizers forced them to eat dog every day to shock white audiences. A New York Times journalist wrote, they capered about like monkeys, shrieking and waving spears. The crowd cheered. The savages grinned. I felt unsettled. They weren't grinning. They were surviving. One Igorot elder whispered, they say this is progress, but it feels like a prison. At least 6 Filipinos died during the exhibit. Among them, a boy named Antero, age 12. He died of exposure, cold, sickness, starvation. The St. Louis Republic reported, Igorote boy perishes, exhibit to continue. No ceremony, no apology, just a body, and a show that went on. Papers described Filipinos as semi-human, backward, grateful. Children collected savage trading cards. Souvenir shops sold toy spears. Even President Roosevelt said, the Philippine exhibit demonstrates the great work we have undertaken, bringing civilization to the Orient. But the Philippines already had civilization. They had law, trade, literacy, and agriculture, long before the U.S. existed. Not all the Filipinos were tribal. Some were pensionado program scholars, Filipino students sent to study in America. One such man, Vicente Mendoza, wrote, we were here to learn. Instead, we were exhibits. We were not part of the reservation, but we could not escape its shadow. Most were quietly sent home. Others were left behind. A few intermarried, but the damage was done. The myth of the Filipino savage persisted. It showed up in textbooks, cartoons, policy. Most Americans today don't know the U.S. ever colonized the Philippines. Fewer know about the 200,000 deaths during the Philippine-American War. What was lost? Dignity, history, cultural memory. They were forced to eat, smile, perform, not to preserve heritage, but to prove a lie, that they were less than human. Today, scholars and Filipino educators are telling the truth. But still, no apology, no monument, no reckoning, only silence. And that silence is what this video hopes to end. What happened at the St. Louis World's Fair in 1904 was not an isolated incident. It was part of a broader pattern of global exploitation, where indigenous and colonized peoples were used as tools of propaganda. The individuals placed in the Philippine Reservation were not curiosities. They were sons and daughters, elders and leaders. Their traditions were reduced to spectacle. Their suffering became entertainment. Their identities were rewritten to serve an empire's agenda. This chapter in history reminds us that behind the myth of civilization and progress, there were cages. And behind those cages, real lives. Remembering them is not just about revisiting injustice. It is about restoring dignity to those who were denied it.